Recording the receipt of goods and/or services into the Visage system is quick and easy. We would have already raised our purchase order that's been sent to the supplier either as a fax, an email, possibly even as a hard copy strapped to the leg of a carrier pigeon. But regardless, the supplier has got our order and is now going to be sending us the goods or supplying the services that we've ordered. Hopefully you have your suppliers well trained and they're sending you an invoice with goods. Let's look at how we'd actually process a scenario where we're getting some stock that we've ordered from a supplier who's sent us invoice with goods. Navigationally, we'd go to Purchase Orders, Transactions, and we would enter this up as a goods receipt. This one transaction will update details of our original order, update our accounts payable system with the details from the invoice, update our inventory system with the stock that's being received, and update our general ledger system with any add-on charges for things like freight, or if we had services, they will flow through to the general ledger directly as well. The first piece of information the system will ask us for is the order number, or numbers, because this is a table that can have many rows associated with it. But what's the order number that the supplier is actually satisfying? In this case, it should be clearly marked on the invoice, so I'll just enter in my order number 1517. You'll see the system saw that there were 3 lines outstanding on that purchase order, and it's filled some details in for us. The first of these is who the supplier is that we raised that order for. You'll notice the system wasn't able, and obviously didn't know in advance, what the invoice number is, so we might just fill that in. System is also assuming the transaction, the actual receipt, is happening today, and that's ideally what you want to do. The day the truck arrives, and certainly within 5 or 10 minutes or maybe an hour or so of the truck actually leaving, that the system is updated with those details so everyone in your organisation is working with current information. So let's assume that yes, that receipt date is correct, and there's some more details filled in automatically here. To keep things in track, that invoice date might have actually taken a day or two to travel from the supplier to us, so his invoice may have actually been dated the 24th of the month. The due dates are calculated for you automatically based on the terms and so forth that have been set up for the supplier, but you have the ability of overriding any of these dates if need be. For example, it could be a special promotion by the supplier, order now and don't pay until the end of May or something similar. So you can dream about those sort of terms, but you can also override things like the due date if need be. It could also be that the due date is much sooner because you've negotiated a special price providing you pay before a particular date. The other details you need to fill in is the total value of the invoice. Go to the bottom line of the invoice and it will have a figure out there. I might have read $1,002 off the bottom of the invoice, so simply plug that in. We have this thing called a non-discount amount. If your supplier gives you a gross percentage off an invoice, might give you 10% off everything, there may be some things that you don't get that percentage off, for example freight and so forth, so you just enter those non-discount amounts in there. But that sort of terms of trade are becoming rarer these days, so that tends not to be used. If we go to our product screen now, we'll see that the details have automatically been filled in for the 3 items that were outstanding on that purchase order. You'll see as we move between each of these lines, we have 12 of that item outstanding. If we come down to this bottom item, there are 2 of those outstanding. Now you have a number of ways of entering in the details of the physical receipt. By far the easiest way is hopefully the supplier has supplied you with absolutely everything, so you simply hit the Receive All button and the system is now going to plug in the quantities received for us based on whatever was actually outstanding. The system has also filled in the unit cost for us based on the price that was quoted on the original order form, and if the supplier has accepted that order and if subsequently tries to charge you more, you've obviously got a good case for seeking a credit in that case, unless of course they did notify you and for some reason someone neglected to update the original purchase order. And you may recall when we looked at purchase orders, we said it was important to update those statuses, and part of those statuses may also be price variations that you're alerted to. But in the ideal world, at this stage, our data entry is done. Of course, it could be that some of these items didn't arrive. Let's say this entire line here didn't arrive. You can simply remove it. In this case, select the row by clicking in the row and click the red X to get rid of that row from the receipt. Likewise, this next item, although we had 2 outstanding, we may have only actually received 1. So you can adjust the quantities. And as we said, if there was a price variation, let's say the supplier was feeling generous and was only going to charge us $14,000, you can key that price in. General rule of thumb, if the supplier charges you less than what you're expecting from the purchase order, play mum, happily accept it, thank you very much. If he's trying to charge you more, that becomes something that needs to be investigated. You'll also notice we have here the system has determined that potentially if you are producing stock tickets, we need 1 stock ticket for this line. You have a button here that will allow you to produce stock tickets on a line-by-line basis, or down the bottom you can print stock tickets for everything that you're receiving. Now, you may or may not use stock tickets to put your own identification onto products, and you can have tickets produced for some products and not others. That's determined by a flag on the product master file itself. But if you do produce stock tickets, it's a very nice way of cross-checking quantities and so forth as well, because if you produce stock tickets for everything, you should be able to go out, attach those to the products and have no tickets left over, and also not be short. If you are in either of those scenarios, you've obviously got a problem with the quantities that have been entered on the system. But in our ideal world, our receipt is basically finished. At this stage, we simply hit the save button and we get an error. And the reason we get an error is because we have entered up stock with a total value of $15,849.57, and yet on that front screen where I said I read a total from the bottom of the invoice, that was only $1,002. So the system is picking up and alerting us to the fact that something is wrong with my data entry. Either that original invoice amount was incorrect, or something is wrong with the quantities I've received, the pricing, the price per, there is something wrong, because these figures should obviously match. Now, I should also point out, we don't have any services at this stage. I'm not going to complicate things there, but if you were charged freight, let's say, from your supplier, you can go to this distribution screen. You can have a product called freight, by the way. A lot of people use that to make life nice and easy. But you can also receive things directly against a general ledger account. I'm not sure what my freight account number is, so I'll just use a search screen. That looks like a good number. I'll distribute it to the entity that I'm in. We may have been charged $20 for freight, and that was ex-tax, so the GST will be added and totals adjusted accordingly. And there could be a whole stack of other add-on charges here for fumigation or inspections and so forth as well. But to actually complete this receipt, which still doesn't balance, let's assume that I misread something on my front of the screen, and the actual amount that I needed for my invoice value is this $15,000. I took that from a different piece of paper. So once those two figures agree, just keep your eye on this voucher number field here at the moment. Once they agree, I hit the save button. The system at this stage will allocate a voucher number for me. Now that, you will recall, is your internal reference for the supplier's invoice. That'll be used to track changes or track the history of this transaction through the accounts payable system. Now, I believe it's a good and worthwhile exercise at this stage. If you've got a hard copy of the supplier's invoice in front of you, or maybe it's been sent as an email or something similar, go to the note log area and actually record that. Upload a scan of that particular invoice if it's a hard copy, or a copy of the message. onto the actual receipt itself. That's going to flow through the accounts payable system, and then if there are any questions or queries later on, people have access to the original source documents and any subsequent queries and so forth that arise from that. But at this stage, that's our receipt into the system. Simple, quick and easy. You'll see I have two buttons in the center down here. One of these is an edit list, the other is a post process. Now if I hit the edit list button, the system will basically give me a non-destructive list of the particular receipt that I'm looking at the moment. So I can really just confirm that the details that I have entered correspond to what's actually on the supplier's invoice, and if they do, I can simply hit the post button. I should also point out that if I don't have an invoice or a supplier's invoice up on the screen when I hit this edit list button, what will happen is I will get an edit list of all of the receipts that have been physically entered up onto the system, potentially just by me or from other users. So in this case I think there may have been another 2 or 3 that had been entered up previously. So here's the details of all the receipts currently sitting on the system. And likewise with the post button. If you have an invoice up on the screen, I'll call this one back up. If you have oops, that wasn't the right number. 1 2 3 4 5 3 2 1. That's a bit better. If you have the transaction up on the screen, then these edit and post buttons work for just that particular receipt, just that transaction. And I think that's a great way to work. Enter the details up of the receipt, do the edit list, make sure it's right, and if it is, hit the post button straight away. Right, go and update the stock system, go and update the creditors system with those details. Everything is up to date now. So if I was to use my little cheat button here, I'll go to my maintenance screen for orders, and if I was to call up that order 1517 that we just received, we'll see that the order has been printed, but here are the details of the invoice that I just posted through the system. Historically, actually if we come across here to the voucher, here's the details of the voucher sitting on the creditor's account, and from that of course they can come and drill through that and call up the details of the actual invoice that we entered on the system. And once more, if we'd recorded those details on the note log, they could go and get hard copies of those as well. But by and large, in terms of receiving stock into the system or services, that was it. Simply record, do an edit, do a post, stock's in the system. Now of course there are complications. It may be that you don't get invoiced with goods. It may be that you're in the scenario where you get a delivery docket with the goods. Or it could be your corporate procedures are such that even if you do get invoiced with goods, the stock is actually initially entered as a goods receipt note, which is subsequently matched to an invoice that arrives either at the same time or later from the supplier through a goods receipt match process. We'll have a look at those scenarios next, but in terms of getting stock in, if you get your orders out, it's that quick, that easy.